Okay, good morning, everyone. Hello. Okay, we're late getting started. Let's start the meeting. This is a public meeting to consider the proposed comprehensive official plan and zoning bylaw amendments listed as items 3, 4, 6, 7, and 8 on today's agenda. For the items just mentioned, only those who make oral submissions today or written submissions before the amendments are adopted may appeal the matter to the local planning appeal tribunal. In addition, the applicant may appeal the matter to the local planning appeal tribunal if council does not adopt an amendment within 150 days of receipt of the application for zoning and 210 days for an official plan amendment. A comment sheet is available at the door for anyone wishing to submit written comments on these amendments. And I'd also remind councillors on the committee that if you have any motions on any of the items listed today, please send a copy to us ahead of the public delegation so that the committee members and staff and the public have an opportunity to review and, as necessary, clarify your motion during the discussion of the matter. Thank you very much. So, any declarations of interest for anybody? None? Confirmation of minutes from our meeting on September 11th, 2018. Carried. All right. Our first item is the renovation of original house and construction of a rear addition at 119 York Street, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act within the Byward Market Heritage Conservation District. We have one speaker on that, Gary McLaughlin. Gary, are you here? Okay. Are you in opposition? Or are you for or against? Okay, so we'll be holding that item. Thank you. Okay, item number 2 is the application to alter the Medical Arts Building, 180 Metcalfe Street, a property designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Rod Leahy is here. Does anyone have any questions on this one? Rod, do you need to, there you are. Do you need to speak if we're prepared to carry this item? Thank you very much. Is this item carried? Thank you. Item number 3 is zoning bylaw amendment, parts of 2336 10th Line Road. We have one speaker, Hugo Lalonde. Does anyone have any questions on this item? So, Hugo, do you need to speak if we're prepared to carry this item? Thank you. So is the item carried? Thank you. Next item is zoning bylaw amendment for 241 Eric Chapnick Way in Orleans Ward. I have no speakers. Is this item carried? Oh, wait a minute. Now I do. Oh, Greg? Where are you? Greg Winters, do you need to speak if we're prepared to carry it? Thank you very much. So is this item carried? We want to hold it? Eric Chapnick? The Eric Chapnick Way? Okay. So is the zoning bylaw amendment for 241 Eric Chapnick Way carried? Carried. Thank you. Okay, item number 6, we're holding that. We have speakers. That is the zoning bylaw amendment for part of 401 and part of 411 Corkstown Road. Wait a minute, how did I get to that? Oh, I missed item 5. Item number 5 is the site plan control, 113 and 115 Echo Drive. We have speakers, so we're holding that one. Item number 7. No, I already did 6. And we're holding it because it's I have speakers. Item number 7 is the zoning bylaw amendment. So it's in Councillor Cadry's ward, 5897 Fernbank Road. I have Jeff Nadeau here from Proton. Does anyone on the committee have any questions? No? Jeff Nadeau, if the committee is prepared to carry this item, do you still need to speak? Okay, is this item carried? Thanks very much. Okay, number 8 is in my ward. It's official plan and zoning bylaw amendment for 3370 Greenbank Road. And Greg Winters is here again on that one. Does anyone, I know I don't have any questions. Does anyone here have any questions on item number 8? Do you still need to speak if we're prepared to carry it, Greg? Thanks very much. So that item is carried, everybody? Yes? Okay, item number 9 is the settlement of some appeals to OPA 150. Good news. Okay. So, Murray, you'll be here if we need you for a bit. And item number 10 is the status update, Planning Committee inquiries and motions for the period ending 14th of September 2018. We have no speakers. Is it received? Okay. Okay, we'll go back to the beginning. The first item held is the first item, which is the renovation of the original house, construction of a rear addition at 119 York Street, a property designated as Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act within the Byward Market Heritage Conservation District. It's in Conseiller Fleury's riding and ward, sorry. You almost got a promotion there, Matt. And we have before us, well, Dana Collins is here, and David Maloney. So we're not doing a presentation. Okay, so I am going to bring the person, the delegation up. Gary McLaughlin, would you like to come up? And sir, there's a mic on the door side there. Just press the button to turn it on. Good morning.
Good morning.
You have 5 minutes, sir.
Okay. Won't be that long. I'd just like to make one request to the Planning Committee is that they follow the existing rules that are in place for that property. Right now, what's on the books is that if there is the adjacent property, 121 York Street, has a backyard, and due to that, they need to have the property beside it that is requested just expansion to the property line is required to have 3.5 meters from the property line due to the adjacent neighbor having a backyard. I'd just like the committee to follow those rules that are on the books now. And that's basically it.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. McLaughlin? Well, thank you for coming out, sir. I'm going to ask staff to comment on that after you take your seat.
Okay.
David?
Good morning, Madam Chair. So the underlying zoning on this property is MD, mixed-use downtown zone, which requires a 0 meter rear yard setback. However, the heritage overlay under Section 60 of the zoning bylaw also does apply on this property. And the heritage overlay suggests that requires the rear yard setback to be determined by the underlying zoning. So in this case, MD, which would be 0 meters. However, in the same sentence, it does say in no case can the rear yard setback be less than 3 meters. So in this case, there is a requirement for a variance to that rear yard setback to allow for a 0 meter setback. In terms of the heritage review, we've reviewed the appropriateness of the development, and we are through the Byward Market HCD guidelines. It does suggest looking at adjacent properties to determine what would be an appropriate setback. So we've done that through our review and determined that this is an appropriate setback given there's a 0 meter setback to the west, and also the condo building in behind is a 0 meter setback as well.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Maloney? No? Okay, thank you for that explanation. Does anyone have any comments at all? So on the item, the renovation of original house and construction of a rear addition at 119 York Street, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act within the Byward Market Heritage Conservation District. Is that approved? Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Okay, the next item up is site plan control. Site plan was lifted by Councillor Chernchenko. There you are. 113 and 115 Echo Drive. On this item, we have John Dance to speak, and then we have Jack Sterling, Emily Myers, Barry Hoban, and Carl Fernie. So I will, Andrew McCrate is here. He is the planner of file, and his boss, Doug James. I also would say, if this is not Leanne Snedden beside me, I don't know if you noticed, it is Derek Moody. Leanne is our Director of Planning, and she had to be away at meetings. I think she's at Centerpoint for important meetings today. So Derek is filling in and very capable of doing so. Just not as cute, that's all. Sorry, Derek. Okay, so we're not having a presentation on this, but I'm going to ask Mr. Dance to come forward. He's the past president of Old Ottawa East Community Association. We do have your comments on file. Thanks very much for sending them. It's always great to have the chance to read them before, having a presentation. We're also going to have a technical amendment to correct document 6 by adding one document to the list. Why don't we do that before he starts? Vice Chair Tierney, the technical amendment for item number 5. There was a document that was missing, and this adds it back in.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. Whereas the report recommends that the approval of the site plan control application for the construction of the new 6-story building contains 39 units, as provided in document 3, 4, 5, and 6. Whereas the report contains the interim use plan in document 3, the proposed site plan, and the interim use plan is not listed in document 6. List of approved plans in the report. Therefore, be resolved that the Planning Committee amend the list of document 6, list of approved plans and reports to include 13. Interim use plan, drawing number S1, prepared by Hoban Architecture, dated 2017-11-03, revision 7, dated 2018-06-29.
Thank you. Are you ready, Mr. Dance? Did you have a presentation?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
And thank you to Councillor Chernyshenko who withdrew the delegated authority on this one. So 2 years ago, we'll try again. Sorry, it's not advanced. Could you advance next slide, please? 2 years ago, we were here. We supported the bylaw amendment. We supported the proposed 6-story structure. And the 3 live-work units on Main. But we noted that the rezoning to traditional Main Street should include the same restrictions as what pertains to the rest of Main Street, Hawthorne to Clegg, and specifically opposed raised elevation of Main Street units, lack of integration of Main Street public realm, and the lack of expanded sidewalks, something that the secondary plan requires. Councillor Chernyshenko repeatedly requested the Main Street units be at grade. And could you advance again, please? Sorry. We're having a few technical problems here. Yeah. So since then, we'd hoped through progress through the site plan control process. That's what's supposed to happen. But the developer has been adamant that the Echo entrance would be at grade, but not the Main Street entrances. The developer initially responded that at grade accessibility to main units could be through the Echo entrance, 50-meter walk, a roundabout, on a wheelchair, hardly contributing to vibrancy. Then said the ramps could be built to Main Street units, but these ramps will only be built if the owners operate the units with commercial functions, then the owners must pay for ramps. The secondary plan that was approved by the Planning Committee by Council is flouted by the provision, by this application. If I can go on to the next slide, please. So why does grade level matter? Well, the secondary plan, CDP, we worked really hard with the city on that, and the idea was that, yes, there'd be much more intensification in Old Ottawa East, but we'd get a vibrant and thriving Main Street with a pedestrian-friendly environment along street frontages and main facades, with primary doors at ground level facing street and accessible from the public sidewalk. At grade is inviting and readily accessible and creates a better public realm. For at least 2 years, and maybe much longer, the city has not approved any new TN buildings with ground floor not at grade. It's a terrible precedent for the rest of Main Street. Could I have the next slide, please? So this is what this looks like. And look, the architect, the developer, they've got a lovely, lovely building. There's no question about that. Commend them for that. But it can be lovely towards Echo, but it can also work for Main. It does not work at Main. That's what it looks like from Main Street. Does that look like a traditional Main Street to any of you here? It does not. It must be changed. Could I have the next slide, please? This, on the other hand, which you've approved, is Corners in Main, well underway. That's what it's supposed to look like. And it's beyond us why this excellent developer, superb architect, can't design something that has twice the frontage on Main as it does in Echo, that is similar to what exists on the rest of Main Street, the traditional Main Street. We wanted vitality, that's not what we're getting. Could you have the next slide, please? So the choice is, well, let's put it in context. Mayor Watson, 2012, many of us were at that big session, and he spoke of greater predictability and certainty when it comes to development. And we worked hard. We got the CDP, our CDP, SP approved the year after. So what's happened, though, is the certainty that's promised gets tossed aside. It sounds like a trivial thing, but it's really, really important for our traditional Main Street. The developer should not be allowed to just say, oh, well, it's better for the live-work units that we have not at grade. So your choice is basically to side with the developer's proposal or be supportive of a community an improved CDP secondary plan and require Main Street frontages at grade and contributing to street vitality. It's not a big request to the developer, and it will make an enormous difference to the community and to the development of Main Street, something that you all want. If you approve it, you're just setting a really lousy precedent for what will happen in our community and every other community that has traditional Main Street. And that's the fundamental issue. It's not, well, the developer likes it better the way it is, the way they're proposing. You want to have a traditional Main Street that works as one, not that is separated from the street. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dance. Anyone have any questions? Councillor, I almost forgot your name, Councillor Nussbaum.
Good morning.
It's only been 2 weeks.
That's right. Just a quick question, if you go back to your presentation or to the slide that shows the frontage on Main Street.
Right.
So are those is that showing the ramps? Is that what that paved area is between the sidewalks?
Well, if I read this correctly, the ramps aren't showing what there are. There are 3 steps behind the foliage. Okay, so you don't see the ramp in that picture. The ramps are optional. It's something that a buyer has to put in after the fact. The standard, what you buy is stairs, at least according to the staff report.
Okay. I'll have a question to staff afterwards about that, but thank you. Okay.
Anyone else have another question? Councillor Blake?
Thanks. So the objection is that there's 3 stairs?
No, it's twofold. That's part of that is not accessible. It's not at grade, as it is probably in your ward and every other ward. But as significantly is that it's not inviting as a traditional Main Street. You know, the CDP, the secondary plan originally required 2 meters of additional sidewalks so that you'd have an expanded public domain. As per that image you saw of Corners on Main, this does not look like a traditional Main Street development at all.
So is your primary objective or concern that there's no retail on the first floor?
Our primary concern is that it's been built so it's not going to be conducive to have retail that will work well. Retail and other commercial. That's what our primary objective is. Does that look like a vibrant Main Street to you?
Well, it looks like they can walk out of their apartment onto Main Street and that there's landscaping along the Main Street.
Yes, sir. Through the chair, madam. The idea is not that they can walk out, that these are to be vibrant commercial entities. It can't be that.
I'm trying to get you to sum you want it not residential. You want it retail or commercial on the first floor. If that's what you're asking for, just say that.
The council, planning committee previously approved that they could be live-work units. Okay.
Okay.
But at the moment, it's going to be very hard for them to make it work units because of the way they are on the Main Street frontage.
Why couldn't I have my accounting office in that location, or my legal firm in that location, or my massage therapist studio in something like that?
Yes, you could, but would it be inviting? Would it be,
People who want a massage, it would be.
yeah, but does that look at all like the traditional Main Street that we saw in the other image? Is that the way we want all of Main Street to look like? I say no. All of you have most of you have traditional Main Streets, and this is not the way you want a traditional Main Street to look. This development, it has twice the frontage on Main Street as it does on Echo, and then it turns its back on Echo. Is that what it should be? The thing got approved, rezoned as traditional Main Street, and yet it turns its back on Main Street. That's not what you're supposed to be doing, it seems to me.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair.
Mr. Mark, could you just remind us of the zoning that was approved and the zoning that's not before us? Thank you, Mr. Dance, for coming out. Just in case there's any misunderstanding about what was approved for zoning, what it allows. I'm talking about the live-work aspect.
Madam Chair, I would expect that Mr. McCreight would be in a better position to advise you of the zoning that's in place than I would be. What I can advise the committee is that the matter before them is only the site plan authority, and that does not go to use, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Andrew?
Madam Chair, if I take us back to the conversation when this item was before this committee at the time of the OPA and the zoning bylaw amendment, the there was very site-specific policies for this property that amended the secondary plan, and as part of that exercise, a residential use building was fully permitted from a policy perspective. When that translated into the zoning that committee passed, it went to a TM zone that permits a wide range of residential commercial uses. So in the context of the proposal before you and the discussion that just happened, a dwelling unit or residential unit is permitted at grade, a live-work unit is permitted at grade, so it would be a full commercial unit. So all scenarios are permitted at grade.
Anyone have any questions? Councillor Cadre?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And just coming back to staff about the 3 steps to these units from Main Street. Where's the accessibility aspect handled in that particular scenario?
Madam Chair, through the site plan process, we communicated a lot with the Accessibility Advisory Committee. Their first comments was general about accessibility in the building and targeting that 14.6% of the population could have accessible needs. A lot of it was building code specific. Then I prompted that committee to specifically talk about the scenario of if the design of these units as live work or commercial potential pose a problem, and their response was that the units are accessible. They're accessible from the main entrance from Echo and internal to the building. And then secondly, some of the conditions of approval that we set up through purchase and lease agreements require to put in that ramp if a live-work unit or commercial unit exists in that space. So by all accounts, it is accessible, and depending on if it's residential, live-work, or commercial, it will function from an accessible point of view.
Thank you for that. The public delegation just mentioned that if the ramp is required or wanted by the unit, they would have to pay for that. Is that accurate?
That is correct. It is required for a live-work unit or a commercial unit. I think the only exception would be is if the first purchaser, through the marketing as a live-work unit, disclosed that they wanted, then it would probably be built in the first instance. And I don't know who the payment from that would become.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Can I just ask you, we have throughout the city, certainly in the suburbs, we have quite a few of them, and it's desirable to have live-work units. On Longfields Drive, for example, in Barrhaven, we have, besides Mother Teresa High School, I think it's a Richcraft product, but it has, there's a hair salon and there's a masseuse, and then they live there and that sort of thing. But everybody else just lives there. So in those units, and across the city where we have the same ones, I'm sure that you all have them in the suburbs. What are the rules there? Do we make do we force them to have an accessibility, like an accessible ramp? Do we force them to be at grade? Because I'm just thinking of the ones on Longfields, and they're not at grade. And then how does the accessibility portion of it come into play if indeed they open the work portion of their opportunity?
It's a good question, Madam Chair. I'm not sure of the exact specifics of some of the examples that you mentioned, but it would be subject to a building code review, and especially with the new AODA compliance, perhaps a new full commercial unit would have to prove accessibility. And again, in this instance, the entrance from the main building satisfies that requirement. It's that additional layer of the conversation where you get that ramp straight from Main Street that adds that extra level of accessibility. But those other examples, I don't know the specifics.
And so just a question. So say these, the way that this is now, if the market is such that somebody wants to turn one of them into a business, is when they apply for their business permit, is there a trigger there on accessibility? Do we know that?
I believe there would be through the building code, yes.
So at that time, if that was the case, they would be, that would be one of the checks and balances. You have to be accessible. And would it be enough that they're accessible as the applicant suggests from the main door? And they have accessibility there, or in that case, if they were work units, you may not even know this could be beyond what you know, but would there be a need for them to be accessible at their individual unit in that case?
I don't know if there'd be a need from a compliance point of view with the ramp to Main Street, but it is part of the conditions we set up with those purchase and sale agreements, so that anyone looking at these units in the mindset of running a live, work, or commercial is fully aware that that's an obligation. And it's quite common, I think, for someone taking over, if it was a residential space to a commercial, to have to go through some level of work and renovations to accommodate their business needs, and this would just be one component of that discussion.
So if that were to happen, and right now they can either live, they can work, they can probably do live and work. Not probably, they can. But if they're living now and that use changes, there will be a trigger in the mechanism that oversees or guides any change that's necessary at that time.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you for that information. I'm going to go to Councillor. Did you have a question? But did you want to speak now, Councillor Chernchenko?
I just wanted to know you to know there's a motion coming that Councillor Lieber, as a member of this committee, has offered to put forward on my behalf, and you should see it very shortly, where we're simply putting forward as site plan conditions some of these accessibility and a few other minor changes.
Has Mr. Dance seen it?
Mr. Dance has not seen the motion, but all the points that are in it are essentially the sticking points that he
okay, so if you remember at the beginning of the agenda, before I said that, I read that little bit about councillors putting that on the.
I appreciate it. It was taking time coming through, and it's only just ready.
I'm not being critical.
Yeah,
what I'm saying is, hang on a second. What we're going to do is we're going to pause, because but Mr. Dance's points are covered in it, so the applicant has not seen this.
In fact, if it's appropriate, I could read it out so we know that it's on the table.
The applicant
he could indicate whether
hang on a second.
Yeah.
The applicant, so this goes to what I was speaking at the beginning, because we had, when the ALPAT first started, we had a situation that was clearly, it would have been beneficial for the people, the delegations, both the delegations that were public delegations and the applicant, to have seen what was going to be coming at them.
What I can tell you is that these conditions were communicated by letter to the applicant last week. In my invitation to them to accept them, to agree to them in advance, they politely chose not to. I'm sure they will address that here.
So let's put it on the floor.
So there is nothing in the motion that the applicant has not already been asked to agree to. In a sense, we're here for me to try to
That's not my point. I just want it on the floor.
Yep.
So either you put on the floor or Councillor Leeper, but you feel free to present it, and we'll have it moved by Councillor Leeper.
Okay.
Okay? So go ahead.
Now? Right.
Yeah.
Whereas the Old Ottawa East Community Design Plan states that development will, quote, encourage pedestrian use within this intensified Main Street environment by means of streetscape improvements, and whereas the Old Ottawa East Community Design Plan continues by stating that with the move to a more intensely developed mixed-use form of development, the retail frontage will be clearly defined on the first floor. And whereas the area north of the Queensway along Main Street will be under significant development pressure over the course of the next 10 to 15 years, Therefore, be it resolved, the Planning Committee impose the following 3 site plan approval conditions on the development at 113 West 115 Echo. Condition 1, the proponent must build both ramped and walkway access to the units at the outset, ensuring that the existing built condition will always be able to support accessible commercial enterprises with entrances off of Main Street and not via the interior of the building. And condition 2, owners of the ground-oriented units along Main Street are prohibited from installing any form of lattice or screening. Further, they are prohibited from growing vegetation greater than 3 feet in height. And condition 3, any fencing or gates installed at the ground-oriented units must be transparent in nature, no greater than 4 feet in height, and not situated along the property line with Main Street.
Thank you. And so Councillor Luper is going to move that. So now I will call up the rest of the speakers: Jack Sterling, Emily Myers, Barry Hoban, Carl Fernie. Okay. Can I ask some people to... Mark, can you let one of them sit there, please? Just until we get through this item? He is. If that's way better. Thank you. It's getting strange. I mean, I know it's election time, but I didn't know Jack Sterling was going to be a write-on in West Carleton. Good. All right. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Pleasure to be here today. This is an exciting project that has been in the works, as you can tell, for a number of years. I appreciate the comments we've heard today and the comments that we've been hearing for the last number of weeks, and the discussions we've had with members of council. But I just want to, as been discussed, take you back a bit in history. It was 2 years ago that this site came through committee for zoning, and the zoning was very well thought out and addressed by members of the committee. And in fact, if you had the time to look back to the October 11th, 2016 Planning Committee report, Uniform has been consistent in its proposal on this site from day one. The report indicates that there will be 37 dwelling units with 3 ground-oriented units along Main Street intended to function as live-work units. Stated clearly on page 3 of your report 2 years ago. The report goes on to say the ground-oriented units offer animation along Main Street, and the amended policy for commercial use permissions is appropriate given the site locations. The zoning bylaw that was passed offers a shopping basket of uses that are permitted on this site. Uniform has by right the ability to build a purely residential building. Case closed. Uniform, in discussions with the community and wanting to address the issues that the community was raising with respect to animation on the street, has agreed to pursue the live-work opportunity for these 3 units. It's a permitted use. Uniform has not ever had any desire or intention, and still has no desire or intention, to design the building with any opportunity for retail. There is no opportunity for retail on this site. Uniform has reached out to its associates in the retail world. There is no opportunity for retail. That was a beautiful photo that was shown of the Domicile Corners building on Main Street. That's a stretch of Main Street that has gone through your traffic calming reconstruction. There is lay-by parking. There's opportunities for people to stop and park and go into those shops. There is no on-street parking on Main Street in front of this site. In fact, the city is about to undergo a reconstruction of this intersection in conjunction with Domicile, and there is no provision for parking on Main Street in this area at all. The closest on-street parking is about a block and a half away. The other visual that was very appropriate when we were showing the Main Street slide was certainly retail can look very attractive from the street. On Main Street, 1 block south of us, a condominium building was built 6 years ago by Charlesford called the Glassworks. It has a retail component to it similar to what was shown by the community representative. I wanted to stop and take a photo of it the other day for you, but I couldn't because I couldn't stop there and there was no parking. The space is papered over. It is empty. It has had the odd beauty parlor in it, but it is now empty, only reinforcing our concerns about retail use in this area. Instead, Uniform has put forward a proposal supported by staff and consistent with the zoning bylaw to actively promote live-work. Yes, there are 2 steps to the terrace, not 3. They provide a quasi-private area for the resident, and they were specifically required in the zoning when it went through 2 years ago, 130 square meters of amenity space. They provide opportunity for a work unit, in effect, to have a lobby, so that, as to Councillor Blais' question, if a masseuse or a lawyer or a doctor was running a service from that work unit, there would be opportunity to provide a lobby, to provide some accessibility. We see the live-work opportunity here just for that, for doctors, for lawyers, for medical practitioners, etc., not only on an appointment basis, so we don't see access as being an issue in terms of being able to walk up and knock on the door and come in and get an appointment. I also want to clarify, we are agreeable and we have worked with staff on the ramps. We can provide ramps for accessibility to all 3 units. If a live-work purchaser at day 1 is purchasing a unit for live-work, we will provide, the ramp will be provided as part of the purchase and sale discussion with the owner. If a ramp is required second or third sale down the road, the ramp has been site plan approved and can be provided by the purchaser just the same way as somewhere in Center Point where there's live work or anywhere else. A 3rd or 4th round purchaser decides to buy a unit and has to make changes. One of the changes they would have to make is to construct a ramp, but they would not have to go through site plan approval or anything with the city because it's already approved. In summary, we believe the proposal we have put forward conforms to the zoning bylaw, conforms to all Uniform's discussions on this property for the last 3 years, is supported by staff, and we are looking for committee support today on our site plan so that we can proceed and build this spectacular building. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who has questions for any of the folks up here? Councillor Chernushenko? Well, you had your hand up first, so go ahead.
Thank you very much. So that everyone knows, and certainly you know, Jack, and as does the whole proponent team, we've been in conversation throughout those 2 years, different iterations, and the issue is not about the building design, it's not about the zoning, but really it came down to you asked for the rezoning in order to build this kind of unit, and yet the community and I feel that you got the benefits of that new zoning but didn't fully offer the expectations, if you will, that the community design plan, the secondary plan, we're looking for here. I take the point that at the moment and in the foreseeable future, retail is not likely to happen at this location, but it is an evolving location. In the end, The conditions that I'm putting forward today, I guess the first thing I want to ask is that you are fully aware that these are conditions that I have asked for, and so that's not a surprise today. I just want to be sure with LPAT and other possibilities that's clear.
Yes, we saw them.
Yeah, thank you. What in the end then would you describe, how would you characterize your unwillingness to adopt those suggestions at this point? Is it commercial that you feel, let's picture that these units be built with a ramp as opposed to without one from the outset, and that they be built without the lattice work and sort of height of gates staying below the limit I've posed. Are you concerned that they may not sell if it was mandatory that they be built from the outset as sort of fully live work as opposed to modified later?
Well, first of all, I think it's been addressed and stated that even without the ramps, our live work units fully meet the accessibility requirements of the city. The ramps are an addition that we are offering to above and beyond the requirements. I'm going to let Barry discuss some of the aspects with respect to design, but I guess in reviewing your three conditions from the outset, again, we have looked at this building on a very comprehensive basis. If the ramps are needed by any user, they can be provided. But by putting the ramps in the first place and ultimately possibly not requiring them, we think it's a degradation of the streetscape that we're proposing right now. And it does have an impact on that streetscape. Second of all, and with all due respect, I don't think I have ever heard a member of staff or council suggest in a motion that we should limit the height of vegetation. I know there are aspects associated with site planning and safety issues, etc., that are addressed by the police during the site plan approval process, but I am shocked to hear something that would suggest limiting the height of vegetation in an urban setting, unless there were issues related to safety. And to your third point, we are providing low knee wall fencing and ornamental wrought iron railing fencing on top of that, which will be transparent, is below the 4 feet height. The gate is below that. So we are already meeting to that criteria. But as I say, I'll let Barry speak to it. The other 2 points we just see right now as being totally contradictory to the atmosphere and the elevations that we're trying to create from the get-go. I don't know if you have any.
If we could just pull up slide 4 there. I think Councillor Blais, when he was questioning the image that was used in Mr. Dance's presentation, I openly asked the question, is this not suitable for the uses of operating? Pull it down one more. And I guess what we've been asked to do is to balance between two things, live and work. And everything that the conditions that I've seen all basically speak to just live at work and or retail. There's lots of examples around the city. We've done lots of live work on Center Point Drive, where basically one side is raised up and the other side is accessible. These examples of Bridgehead and Westboro, which the Council Leaper would know well, stepped up and small wall. Starbucks in the middle of Councillor's Ward and 3rd Avenue with a raised wall and private area. Rosie's, which has a gated front onto it. The notion that what we're proposing, slip the image up above, our actual proposal, I think actually, contrary to what Mr. Dan says, that looks pretty attractive to me if I'm operating a business out of there and or a boutique retailer. The notion that I have a small secluded area allows me to operate those for live as well as work. But if I'm running a boutique wine bar I'm actually going to have to gate that area in order to get a liquor license. So to me, I understand what the council is trying to do. I just find it incredibly subjective and trying to direct design when in fact, I don't know, I'm supposed to be the designer. To me, that looks like it's actually addressing the street. What we're missing in all of this is that the building is facing Echo Drive, so it's the side. It is an unusual situation with a staggered front. We actually staggered it so it would address Main Street as an inclination. So there's simple comments. I just find the conditions overly subjective.
Okay. So Councillor Leeper and then Blais. Anybody else want to ask questions? Councillor Schreller, did you want to ask questions? No? Okay, I'll add you to after Councillor Blais. Go ahead, Councillor Leeper. That's fine. David? I'm good, David. Okay, perfect. Councillor Blais?
Thanks. Just so I'm clear, there is another door, I presume off of Echo, that provides accessibility to all these units through some kind of central lobby?
Yes. The main access to the building is off of Echo, and all the units have access to the lobby.
Okay. And sorry, for whoever's using the computer, apologize. Can you go back to the other...
What did you say, Steve?
Just go back to the other... I was apologizing to the computer user for making them switch back and forth.
Actually, the slide that I like that hasn't been shown yet is the one that shows that one, the slide number 3, that one.
The diagram.
It shows the terraces and their orientation to the whole building.
Yeah. And so when you call them terraces, I think of a terrace like a balcony. I presume that's not necessarily what it is, but...
No, this is at grade, 2 steps up. And as I say, if you look at each unit, there's 3 units. They have the terrace in front of them that has a low knee wall, landscaped area, and a fence and a gate. They are accessible to Main Street. And to your point of an entrepreneur running a live-work unit there, these terraces or areas provide a quasi-private lobby space for the unit. They still interact very well with the streetscape.
So on this image, that's the brown...
The shaded area, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so would it be permissible to enclose those in the future?
No.
So they must remain open?
Yeah.
Is there no mechanism that you could apply for if you wanted to do that?
You could apply for it. You'd have to go through the condo board. You're changing the exterior of the building, et cetera, et cetera. And I think this has to be stressed. And this is a minor point, but I think it's a very important point. This is a condominium building. So these people will be purchasing this unit, whether they're living in it, working in it, or if it's a retail unit. The marketplace, generally speaking, on retail uses does not purchase their unit. They rent. So even if there was a retailer, which we don't believe there is out there that's looking right now, or in the future, just because of the way this street is set up, a condominium does not afford itself well to lend itself to that type. I think we can't stress enough about the fact that this is a different component of Main Street than the area south of the Queensway. The area south of the Queensway, the city redesigned, put in lay-by parking, has units with domicile and EQ that have retail units as described on the street in a very different setting than we have at this end of the northern end. We have, as I say, can't stress enough, no on-street parking. We are totally separate from what's going on south of Hawthorne.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Schreller? Wait a minute, Councillor Nussbaum then?
Let him go.
Okay, just a quick question. Using your various experience and expertise, can you estimate what the cost would be if a subsequent owner of a condominium or current owner wanted to change the use to live, work, and put in a ramp as required in the site plan right now? Just rough estimate of what would be involved with that?
$1,500.
Okay. So then, I mean,
Depending if it's asphalt or whether it's sandstone or, how rich that material is, but just assuming that it's slab on grade, you're not talking about a substantial expense.
And the objection in terms of putting this at the outset is more aesthetic than it is cost-oriented, is that correct?
Absolutely. You prejudice. The notion is live, work, and we're going to market both those, which we guarantee we'll market those both at the same time. Then it's got to be attractive as a res use as well as a work use.
Right. So I guess I'm left, and maybe it's a question to staff, which maybe I can ask now. Or, sure. I mean, it strikes me that in some ways, if we're trying to be sensitive to the needs of the community here, we're in some way in the worst of both worlds. So the applicant has 2 steps and doesn't want to change that. There is an accessible entrance, but now in the site plan we're requiring that any future live, work owner go above and beyond the accessibility laws of the province and build a second ramp. And I guess what I'm just trying to sort out is what's the policy rationale for that? And if that portion were to be removed in the site plan, I mean, if that's a barrier, if the $1,500 or the $2,000 or something is a barrier to someone putting in a live work unit, and there is an accessible entrance already, and I don't want to denigrate the importance of accessibility, but why build in a second requirement above and beyond the one accessible entrance that's already there? So do you know what I'm saying? I mean, I guess a question to staff, why does staff feel that that provision needs to be in the site plan?
Madam Chair, that condition was put in with discussion with the applicant and through the councillor's office, and it was a condition that was agreeable upon with everyone, to be quite honest, as a means to try to address this community concern. No one disagreed with it. Everyone was agreeable to it, and that's why it's in there. I fully appreciate the councillor's point that he's making, but that was part of the discussion between the applicant and councillor's office and something that we agreed on.
Okay, that's it. Thanks.
That's a great question because I hadn't thought about that. So if I don't know how many people in the community had this concern, but if it wasn't raised through the councillor's office, you would have been satisfied and it would have met the accessible needs of Ontario had can you go back to the picture of the front door? Yeah. If that wide open space with large doors would have sufficed to meet the AODA standards.
As the file lead, I would have taken direction from the Accessibility Advisory Committee, and they did acknowledge that the setup without the ramps was indeed accessible. So okay. That is a possible scenario of where this could have landed.
All right. Does anybody have anything else? If no one else has anything else, thanks for that. That was, Councillor Nussbaum, that was a really good point you brought up. So if no one else, I'm going to go back to Councillor Chernushenko.
Thank you very much. And I do want to acknowledge that we've maintained a cordial and professional dialogue throughout this, which isn't always the case, I have to say. 177 Hopewell. No, okay, just slipped that one in. In the end, is this just semantics? Is it just subjective? Some could interpret it that way. I do take that point that it might be seen that way. To me, really, it is about trying to ensure that Main Street, which is evolving, this section of Main Street, in fact, most of Main Street is evolving right now. It is getting denser. It is becoming more and more of a true Main Street with mixed-use buildings, with retail, and the community and I are concerned that every loss towards that truly engaging Main Street sets the bad precedent that someone else is then going to try to go even further. So it isn't that this one goes that far away from moving away from that, but the next one might point to it. And as much as we always hear there's not supposed to be precedent, everyone tries to use it. And so that is a concern. Is this location likely to have retail? At the moment, no, as I said, not in the near future, but let's keep in mind the density just around this building is quadrupling at a minimum. Where there were little old pre-war and post-war homes on big lots, you now have 60-unit townhouses and four-story buildings just off of Greenfield next door. That is a trend that's going to continue, and it's not a bad thing because it will, in fact, stop the Glassworks beauty salon from shutting down because there isn't sufficient business. So what I want to prevent is taking a step that later we'll regret. It's a shame we didn't at the time make sure that this was fully engaged with the street and accessible and impose on a future owner the cost of making those changes later. So we see the density coming. There's going to be a new protected crossing of Colonel By Drive right to this location and new bike tracks right to this location. So there is the possibility of people coming off Colonel By Drive and saying in the future, oh, look, there's a coffee shop right there, protected crossing. Certainly not the case now with Colonel By Drive. To the point of the $1,500 cost, I guess I would just say I'm trying to get 2 concrete steps in front of my house on Seneca repaired, and I haven't been able to get a quote under $4,000 all summer. So if you've got someone who can do it for $1,500, please let me know. That's trying to get a little humor out of this, but I find
I don't see many people laughing, though.
Yeah, no. I find it hard to think that it's going to be as little as that. With any time I've tried to have repairs done, even on my own home. So in the end, these are coming forward. They may appear subjective. They are about visibility of the buildings, of the units, about making sure they can easily be fully accessible to someone coming off the street. Because picture yourself, you are coming down the street, you say, oh, there's an accountant. Oh, there's massage. Oh, I won't go dental clinic. Pick another, live-work type of scenario. I'll just step in. Oh, no, I've got to go around the building, find the entrance to Echo Drive, press a buzzer, get let in, and then make my way through. Imagine yourself in a wheelchair with a walker, someone for whom that wasn't an easy walk up, or for whom, when you see it, you're thinking, is there public access here? Can I just walk in, or, is this private? Did I need to make an appointment? And so that in the end, that's what I and the community are trying to do. And that's the conditions in front of you are attempting to do, which is to maximize the Main Street character here on Main Street. So I hope you will support Councillor Lieber's motion.
Thank you, Councillor Chernushenko. So, yeas and nays. On the Councillor Chernushenko/Leeper motion. The height of the vegetation, must be ramped from the beginning, no matter who lives there or works there. And any fencing or gates will be installed at the ground-oriented units. And I think, that's it. Okay, so Councillor Blais?
No.
Councillor Brockington? No. Councillor Shirelli? Councillor Cloutier?
No.
Councillor Hubley? No. Councillor Leeper?
Yes.
Councillor Nussbaum?
No.
Councillor Kadri?
No.
Vice Chair Tierney?
No.
And myself, no. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's 9 to 1. And on the report as amended? On the report, not amended. Technical amendment, hang on. We already have that on the table. Right. The technical amendment that was put on the table very, very early, just to add that information, carried. And then on the report as amended. Okay? Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Chernushenko, for doing your best to represent your people, as you always do.
Great. Okay, great. So we'll carry on with item number 6. If I can get staff to put up, there's a couple of pictures that go along with this item. It's a zoning bylaw amendment, Part 401 and 411 of Corkstown Road. We do have some delegations speaking today. So at this point, I'm going to call our first delegation, Ian McConaughey, Chair of the Transportation Committee, Crystal Beach Lakeview Community Association.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen.
Just for warning, you have 5 minutes, and the floor is yours. I'll indicate at 30 seconds when it's getting close.
I'm here representing the Crystal Beach Lakeview Community Association. I'm a member of its executive as well as chair of the Transportation Committee. I'm also representing the association on the Natural Environment Stewardship Committee of the Ottawa Carleton Wildlife Centre. In the springtime, when we noticed the sign posted on Corkstown Road indicating a proposal for a bylaw amendment for Wesley Clover Parks, two of the association executive, our president and myself, met with the executive director at Wesley Clover and staff to build on the existing relationship with them, discuss the proposal and request from them participation in a public meeting for the community to better understand and share opinion on the project. While the proposal was still under revision at that time and work with staff was ongoing, we left with the mutual understanding that they would endeavor to give us 3 weeks' notice before the motion came to Planning Committee for us to collaborate on a public meeting. Regrettably, we received 10 days of notice, no meeting occurred, and an opportunity for any legitimate community input and collaboration was lost both to Wesley Clover Park and our community. And this incident points to a deficiency, in our opinion, in the planning process at City Hall. To quote the committee document, the city considers Planning Committee as the public meeting. That policy, in our opinion, is misguided and unacceptable. This flawed process should change. Absent a true public meeting, and in spite of written comments that are in the document, the community misses the opportunity to share its opinion, its ideas and concerns, and City Council misses the input of its citizens on important projects. Democracy is not well served by this, and we would recommend that there be further action with the new council to change this. Now to the report before you. Staff has located the site as Greenbelt Rural, adjacent to lands designated Greenbelt Employment and Institutional Area. The report also emphasizes that the principal concern with this proposal is around the traffic disruptions and flows associated with the planned theater. Yet on its north side, 401 Corkstown is immediately adjacent to Core Natural Area, the highest designation of land in the Greenbelt. As well, a significant portion of Natural Link Area, the second highest designation. On its west side, there's a natural environment area. The Novatech drawing from June of 2016 shows a tributary watercourse exactly through the concert site and another watercourse adjacent to the site. And sadly, the best the report can do is say it's unlikely to pose any negative effects on the adjacent properties. We're talking here about the Greenbelt, the ultimate jewel in the crown for National Capital Green Space. When Wesley Clover was given permission in 2015 for the Shania Twain concert, why was there no requirement for an environmental impact assessment pre or post-concert? What was the environmental impact of that concert? What will be the impact of several multi-day concerts of 25,000 people each every year should that happen? And while we're told that 5,000 is the proposed number for future concerts from the city's point of view, we're also told that 25,000 over repeat days is what promoters need to make it profitable. 2019 appears to be the slippery slope. Why are you not requiring the appropriate environmental impact study for the concerts in 2019, unlikely to pose any negative effects on adjacent properties, is not good enough? Wesley Clover Park's proposal is only the latest threat to the fragility of our Greenbelt at Moody Drive. We already have the stresses and the damages done by the bus rapid transit, the upcoming LRT and light maintenance and storage facility, DND construction with the loss of significant numbers of trees, and the illegal drainage of wetlands with significant ecosystem degradation several times by persons unknown immediately adjacent to this property under consideration. Not only do we have to preserve the wetlands and the environs, we already have to rehabilitate them. It's only going to get harder and harder to preserve these precious lands as storms get more severe and frequent and demands for development get louder and louder. The people of Ottawa have spoken strongly by their actions that they want government to do more to protect what we have here.
30 seconds.
The Greenbelt is not NCC land or city land or RBCA land. It's our land. You have a responsibility to the citizens of Ottawa to work collaboratively with other governments and agencies of government to more fully protect and rehabilitate our Greenland. Please take the opportunity to strengthen the requirements of the city in this proposal. Don't just assume the NCC is going to take care of it, because that, too, is not good enough. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for having had the opportunity to address the committee.
Right down to the second. You've done this before. Is there any questions to the delegations? And I have some questions I'll have to staff later on myself. Councillor Nussbaum.
Good morning, and thank you for coming out. Could you just explain a little bit how this application is going to affect, you mentioned a couple of natural features, the water course. Can you just explain a little bit more what is the worry in greater detail about how more concerts is going to impact on those features?
A lot of this is absence of knowledge in terms of the public record of what specifically is going to happen at the theater area. We know that there is no building structure that is planned. These will be temporary structures. We know from the diagram from Novatech that there is a small tributary coming from the west into this area and ultimately feeds into ditches adjacent to the Trans-Canada Trail, ultimately into Stillwater Creek and so on. So our concerns are what will happen with the specific construction, what sort of elevation of land changes, what sort of infrastructure changes that they have to do in creating the base for this concert area. We understand that at the Shania Twain concert there was significant damage post-concert, and obviously some sorts of repair were done. We don't have enough information. That's where the absence of public consultations, where we can see the diagrams, talk with the people, interact with them as to concerns that we have, as well as the whole holistic approach of what happens with the Greenbelt. We've had some success, actually, with Stage 2 LRT in dialogue with them when they're preparing for the LRT extension to Moody. There's been interactions, there's been changes of plans, there's been evolution of that. We're not done yet. We've got other concerns, but dialogue and collaboration works. And unfortunately, because this is about an area that is governed by, overseen by, in some respects, different governments, different agencies of government, the lack of collaboration, the silo effect that goes on here, where there isn't enough openness and communication, is damaging to not only the Greenbelt, but to the relationship with the communities associated with the Greenbelt.
Great. Thank you for that. I look around the table. I don't see any further questions for the delegation. Thank you for coming out today.
Thank you.
Our next delegation, I hope I pronounced the name right, Alex Cullen. Alex Cullen, if you can come forward, President of Belltown Neighbors Association. And I don't have to warn you, there's a 5-minute rule, maybe because of you, I don't know, but the rule exists. That's it. But you do have 5 minutes, sir, and the floor starts when you start speaking. Thank you.
Just wait till we get it up, please. That one there. That's the one. Yep. And can I have the mouse to move it along? Thank you. And I just click on it to move it along? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the Planning Committee. My name is Alex Cullen. I'm the president of the Belltown Neighbors Association. We're in the west end of Ottawa. We're located between Britannia Park and Andrew Hayden Park, the Ottawa River on the north and Carling Avenue on the south. Members of the Belltown Neighbors Association became aware that there were zoning changes proposed for NCC lands leased by Wesley Clover Parks. We were dismayed that the NCC did not call public consultation with respect to this proposal. At our June 13 annual general meeting, Belltown residents unanimously agreed to express our concerns over these proposed zoning changes in the National Capital Greenbelt. As well, we are aware that there are other community associations, environmental organizations also concerned about the potential impact of the Wesley Clover Park proposals for these greenbelt lands. The zoning applications involve building an outdoor theater facility, a child care center, which in our view are inconsistent with both the Greenbelt Master Plan's primary role to protect the natural environment and the Greenbelt Master Plan policy prohibiting new federal facilities. Your own official plan, you see it above you here in the presentation, says policies for the Greenbelt in the official plan implement the provisions of the Greenbelt Master Plan prepared by the NCC. I'm trying to move that. There we go. Madam, we have a small delay, Mr. Chairman. I hope we're not out these seconds while we're moving our...
We'll just hold the clock there.
So, and pop in the next one, please. Thank you. So, the Greenbelt Master Plan contains 6 references to non-federal use of lands, and the Wesley Clover Park is a non-federal use of lands. So you see here bolded, all facilities, federal and non-federal, will be encouraged not to exceed and where possible reduce the land footprint that supports those structures. In Chapter 4, the strategic statements focus on federal facilities while discouraging non-federal facility development on Greenbelt lands. Back on in 4.2, Greenbelt Vision Statement, do not allow new non-federal facilities and phase out existing facilities over time. Minimize infrastructure intrusions in the Greenbelt. In Chapter 5, Greenbelt Land Designations, non-federal lands, one whose footprint will be reduced over time to reduce the impacts on other Greenbelt rules. In Table 5.5, there's a listing of policies to apply to non-federal facilities and operations. Limit non-federal facilities to those currently existing within the Greenbelt. Prohibit new facilities on new sites. The prohibited activities, no expansions of major non-federal facilities, no new facilities on the site. So the construction of these new facilities would mean a reduction in green space in the Greenbelt and involve uses that may be better provided outside the Greenbelt. To suggest that ancillary uses associated with existing activities only begs the question of where those uses should stop and runs counter to the principle of protecting Greenbelt from development. The proposal to permit an outdoor theater on the site to accommodate initially 5,000, potentially 25,000 people is wholly out of scale with the site and conflicts with the Greenbelt uses. Our experience, going back to the Shania Twain 2015 event for these concerts, was awful. There was insufficient parking, there was no public transit, the site was a mess afterwards, the experience of those attending was awful. We heard about it at our meeting. It's not what the Greenbelt is supposed to be used for. There are other locations that accommodate concerts of this magnitude. With respect to the child care center being proposed at 411 Corkstown Road, this would involve the construction of another building on this Greenbelt site, leading to further loss of Greenbelt lands to development. There are other locations outside the Greenbelt that can better accommodate a child care center. Therefore, we're asking that this planning committee reject this application to rezone lands of 401, 411 Corkstown Road so that we can continue to preserve green space and be consistent with the primary goal of the Greenbelt Master Plan, which is the protection of the natural environment, particularly with those Greenbelt Master Plan policies governing non-federal use of Greenbelt lands, which do not allow new non-federal facilities to be built. These would be new facilities, runs counter to the policies that are embedded in your official plan. I'd be happy to take any questions, Mr. Chairman.
35 seconds left. Thank you very much, Mr. Cullen. I'm looking around, Councillor Lieber.
So what has the NCC said?
Yes.
They're the stewards of the Greenbelt, in the best position to determine how it should be used moving forward.
Well, they should be bound by their own policies. We wrote them on this matter, and they wrote us back a nice letter saying these are lands leased to Wesley Clover Park. It's their planning application, and of course, if we were going to change our policies, we would hold a public meeting. We were not satisfied with that response. We intend to follow up with our MP because the policies are very clear. 6 references in their master plan, and that master plan is part of your official plan.
But
so we're not happy with the NCC. The NCC fudged, basically.
Okay, and I'll ask staff about that as well. Thanks, Alex.
Councillor Kadri.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Cullen, thank you for your presentation this morning. In terms of you and the previous delegation spoke about damage to the area because of Shania Twain concert. Could you, for my benefit, explain what damages did take place?
Yep. It turned the green space into a muddy field. So just what was green there and grass there before became mud. Because there's only one major entrance off Corkstown Road at 401 onto the site, the parking facilities were totally inadequate. The parking spilled out onto the road. It took ages for people to exit the facility, but the day after it was a mess. That is what was reported.
Thank you for that. But the damage to the fields or to the grass area, was it repaired? Was it not afterwards?
Repaired, I can't speak to repair. It recovered. But this is not a use that the Greenbelt was designed for. I take classes in there for cross-country skiing. Obviously, that's winter, and we use the trails. That's recreational use. It's the former Nepean Equestrian Center, so you're taking advantage of the rural aspect of the site. By putting up outdoor structures, by having these kind of events, that is not consistent with the Greenbelt in terms of promoting the environment. This is an urban activity, having a concert like that. You have the Canadian Tire place just down the road that presumably in a few years will be vacant when you develop LeBreton Flats. There are lots of other opportunities, other locations to hold these kind of urban events in rather than have it in a Greenbelt setting.
So the horse show that's held every year in the Wesley Clover Park.
They accommodate that is, they have a built infrastructure there. They're able to handle the parking. You don't see the parking spill over on Corkstown Road. They're using facilities that are in place, and of course they look after the green space afterwards. We don't have a complaint about that. That's been going on for a long time. That's using existing facilities. You're talking about a new use, and the Greenbelt Master Plan is very clear about non-federal use of land. No new uses. Their expectation is to limit, to reduce, to eliminate non-federal uses by 2067.
Hang on, Mr. Cullen. That was the question that was asked by my colleague, Mr. Leeper, about the NCC. So that's part of their bucket, right? In terms of what I'm trying to get at this point, is the events are being held already there in terms of the horse show, for example. And the damage that the Shania Twain concert may have caused previously has been repaired. So I don't see where you're...
So, Mr. Councillor Kadri, just look at the screen there. So it says here, limit non-federal facilities to those currently existing, so that's the horse show.
No, I get that, Mr. Cullen.
Prohibit new facilities. Prohibit new facilities on new sites.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So the outdoor center,
Great, thank you very much for that. Do you have any further questions for the delegation, Councillor Hubley?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Mr. Cullen, there's an existing school or daycare center right there at 411 now. I've been out there. I've visited. The kids are getting to learn all about the environment. They're getting to walk the trails and everything. Yep. So I'm not quite sure why you're objecting to bringing more kids into that experience.
Not at all. I'm the former chair of the Campsite Authority. I know very well the facility you have. It's not a child care facility. It's a field house. Canada Nordique uses it in the winter. I intend to be teaching there. My grandson's going to be one of the new kids learning, and that's great. But when you're talking about an additional building on site that will have to have full services for a child care center, I'm sorry, that's new development, new uses. The policies here clearly prohibit new uses. So there's another place for the child care facility. For day programs, they have the facilities in place. But if you put in a new building, you are eliminating green space. It runs counter to these policies.
Would you, well, maybe you wouldn't agree with this, but I think most people would agree that since the city has withdrawn from the care of the site and turned it over to Wesley Clover, it has been simply amazing, the work they have done with that area. Sure. All the facilities in there, the barns, they've now got world-class equestrian events back there. I think the investment's been fantastic. I was there recently where they're installing bat houses, which is probably going to do more for reducing our mosquito population than any other effort across the city. So I'm sorry, Mr. Cullen, I think what they're proposing here is very good for our community. I believe we are still protecting the greenbelt, and I think we are actually trying to do something, or I should say Wesley Clover, we shouldn't take credit for this. What they're proposing here is actually going to bring more people into the area and learn more about the environment and why it's so important to protect the greenbelt.
So where do you draw the line in terms of additional uses? I mean, this is, so you have an outdoor theater. So maybe you want a canteen to go with it. Maybe you want more washrooms to go with it. And step by step by step, you lose green space. There are other places for a concert. There are other places for a childcare facility. The policy is clear. No new non-federal uses. This is a non-federal use. We go to the bottom line of Wesley Clover Park, not in the public interest in protecting green space in the greenbelt. Communities across the city.
Did you come down by the parkway today, or did you come down on that?
Okay, Councillor, I'm going to ask if there's any this is starting to enter into debate, so if I could ask, Councillor Hubley, if I can ask you just to remain with the questions for the delegation, if it can be concise in response. We do have other delegations as well. Councillor Hubley.
And this, I think, will be the last question. If you came down by the parkway today, as probably many people did, you would have seen where they had Blues Fest. That was a mud pit, as you described, the day after the concert. When you go by today or weeks ago...
National War...
excuse me, Mr. Cullen. Okay. Maybe someone's got to turn his mic off till it's his turn to speak. Now we know why that rule's there. The green space at the...
Councillor, can you get to your question for the delegation?
I'm just making a point that...
What was the question, just so the delegation can answer?
I want to see if he had seen that. Clearly he hasn't. So it's the exact same...
Okay. So on this, sorry, to the delegation, I'm going to stop at this line of questioning. It's entered into debate now. Do we have questions for the delegation at this point, please? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming up, Mr. Cullen. We do have next on board Teresa Kavanaugh. Teresa, if you can come forward. Ms. Kavanaugh. You have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you. And I usually stay within the 5 minutes. My name is Teresa Kavanaugh. I'm a resident of Belltown, and I'm a candidate for City Council for Bay Ward. I'm here supporting my community associations and residents in Bay Ward in opposing the development in the Greenbelt, particularly the proposal for an outdoor theatre and childcare centre in Wesley Clover Park on Corkstown Road in the Greenbelt. The National Capital Greenbelt is precious to many residents, not just Bay Ward, but across the city. It preserves green spaces and provides important recreational activities and relief from Ottawa's urban area. To quote the NCC Greenbelt Master Plan, the Greenbelt was conceived of and continues to be a tangible expression of the federal government's desire for a capital of outstanding character and beauty. The Greenbelt enhances the unique identity of Canada's capital region, and as the urban area grows, the Greenbelt's role in defining, beautifying, and conserving nature in the capital for the benefit of all Canadians will continue to grow in importance. The Greenbelt provides residents of Canada's capital region with many quality of life benefits that will benefit and continue to be important and are expected to be even more important in the future for more people and increase recreational and economic activities. As the urban matrix evolves and intensifies, the Greenbelt's significance will increase and become more important to residents and visitors as a place of nature, recreation, and agriculture. This master plan needs the commitment of our leaders and citizens so that the Greenbelt can continue to grace the capital for the benefits of the present and future generations. I ask that you show leadership and vote to oppose this development in Wesley Clover Park. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for the presentation today. Do you have any questions to the delegation? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming out today.
Thank you very much.
Next, we do have the applicant, Greg Winters, and Karen Spades. Sparks, forgive me. Do you have presentations to go along with the... None at all? Okay, great. Great. You have 5 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Greg Winters. I'm a Senior Project Manager and Urban Planner for Novatech. I'm here with Karen Sparks, who is the Executive Director for Wesley Clover Parks. So what we're here today for is, thank you very much for this opportunity, first off. It's an exciting project. It's an exciting facility. As Councillor Hubley was talking about, they've done a lot of great things. Wesley Clover has been nothing but an exemplary corporate citizen in bringing new facilities and new events to this site that are benefiting the community and the city as a whole. There seems to be a lot of confusion today and in the past in some of the discussions we've had with the community associations, with people who have called me about this application, in that they seem to be thinking that we're actually applying for some new use. We're spending a significant amount of time today talking about the Greenbelt Master Plan as if we were applying for an amendment to that process. In fact, we're not. The NCC has been and continues to be embraced in this project throughout. They've actually come to the City of Ottawa. They've had meetings with city staff to explain the proposals. And what's significant to note here is that the Wesley Clover Parks and the NCC have worked together on a process where they have obtained a federal land use approval in 2013, which amended the Green Space Master Plan to allow these specific uses to happen in principle. Subsequent to that, and this is all in line with the lease agreement that they signed with the NCC that allows them to use these uses. So the forest school, the equestrian uses, expansions to this facilities, improvements to this facilities, the addition of soccer fields, the outdoor athletic facilities, the fun runs, all these things have been contemplated since day one in the lease agreement when Wesley Clover Parks took over this facility, both the equestrian park and the campground. Subsequent to that, now the NCC has actually given another approval to this, which is a federal land use approval for a master plan for the site, which has been included as a document in the planning rationale that I wrote, which shows conceptually all the uses that are going to occur on this site. And again, we're including the FIFA soccer field, which has been constructed, the 5 soccer fields that have been constructed now that are being used by West Ottawa Soccer Club, as well as the forest school, which is not a facility at this point in time, but it's a use. The children are walking through the woods on existing trails in a campground. So what that master plan does also contemplate for is the potential to construct some extra facilities. There is the contemplation that we're going to be building a forest school some point in the future. We don't know how big, how large. All that we do know is that if it is to be constructed, it would be constructed in the already disturbed area of the campground location. So it would be within that where the existing buildings and structures currently are, and services are currently existing for sanitary and water to that site. We also, before we can do any of these things, have to go back to the NCC again and seek another federal land use approval. They cannot put a shovel in the ground. We cannot do any work on this site without seeking a federal land use approval each and every time we go to do anything. In addition to that, with city staff, we have to apply for a site plan application for the site. There is a holding provision that's contemplated in the zoning bylaw that if we are to build that building, we're going to have to come in and do an environmental impact assessment, an environmental impact statement to show that whatever proposed structures we build in the site are not going to impact the uses. What we're really here today for is to turn a page on something that has already occurred on the site. The zoning does not accurately reflect the uses as they occur on the site today, and they're not in perfect alignment with the NCC's policies and the approvals that have been given. What we're seeking to do is to change the zoning amendment to add the uses to bring them in alignment. So we keep using the terms of theater. Everybody that's called me today keeps thinking that we're building a multiplex. We're not building a multiplex. This is an outdoor venue. We've built a gravel pad in 2015 for the Shania Twain concert. It was constructed in accordance with review through the NCC. We received a federal land use approval for it. We kept everything well outside of the setbacks of the water courses, so we've adhered to the 15-meter setback from the water courses, and that was in consultation with both the NCC and the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority. The gravel pad is the only feature that you will see there that is going to be for a concert as a permanent feature. That's to hold the stage in its location. Everything else is trucked in and trucked off the site when it's done. And much to the discussion that we've been having today, I'm at a loss to figure out what impact there was on a grass field. Wesley Clover Parks, and Karen Sparks can speak to this, continues to use that eventing facility for their horse events. So they actually have field jumping, and the horses use that facility. They also grow hay on that spot. So they're not in the business of destroying or wrecking a facility that they need to actually support their core function of as an equestrian facility. So we haven't had any impact. Nobody's indicated any impact. And in fact, we had to get a federal land use approval in advance, and we had to do federal land use approvals and review after the event. And the NCC was in attendance during the Shania Twain concert. So I'm at a bit of a loss as to what impacts we're talking about here today. So I'll summarize here right now because I've used up my 5 minutes, but I would like, if necessary, to allow Karen to speak as well.
What rules did you lay down? Any? If none, go ahead, Karen.
Thanks everyone. I can speak to the activities that are happening there today.
Do you want to hear about the activities happening there?
Do you want to just answer? We may have questions that I can answer.
Does anyone have questions? Well, we have some questions. But go ahead, speak for a couple of minutes, and then we'll ask you some questions.
Sure, I can just add to what Greg was saying. In advance, everyone's bringing up the 2015 concert. There was minimal damage, a few mud tracks, which we repaired. In terms of an EA, an environmental assessment, that did occur in advance, and we provided lands to compensate for habitat loss to the bobolink bird. So those lands are actively, we monitor them in consultation with a consultant to monitor those lands for the bobolink bird. It's because it was a hayfield, so the bobolink roots there, and so we did compensation land. That's the only really EA. We also monitored bats, barn swallows, before and after the concert, and they were completely unaffected by the 2015 concert. Like Greg said, there's no major, there's no construction. It will all be outdoor. There's no theater being built or anything. It's just theater use. I think I should speak to the theater use that is there right now for the 5,000 and under. We currently have quite a few charity runs and live music that would happen during an equestrian event or during a charity run. A few weekends ago, we had an RBC fun run that raised over $350,000 for CHEO. We need theater use to be able to allow to continue to allow those type of things to happen on the property. For a major event, we're asking for a 2-day kind of a hold for you guys to allow us to try out the event. If it doesn't work out, if SEAT has every right to not agree for it to go on. It's the third party, it's Live Nation that we're putting on that event. SEAT has every right to say no to that event, and that's their business. We would like to, as the site, allow that to happen. And from our perspective, if it doesn't work out, if there are issues, the $25,000 or the $20,000 to $25,000 concert, we don't want to go forward. If it's not a good thing for the city, we don't want to do it. It is important to us, though, to be able to allow up to 5,000 people for live music for after charity events and during equestrian events and that type of thing.
Okay, Councillor Shirelli, can I just see who wants to ask questions? So we have Shirelli, we have Nussbaum, Leeper. Sure, Taylor. That's it? Okay. So go ahead, Councillor Shirelli.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I was at the concert, and just my observation of that was the biggest problem was dealing with the shuttling in or lack of shuttling in. I don't think people ever realize that you were holding something as big as a Red Blacks game, and you could have just used the same system that the Red Blacks used, and you wouldn't have had what ended up being the main problem. I was able to walk home, get my car, and then drive and pick up my family at it after the concert before they could get out properly. So I think that is as much on us as it was on you guys, because you guys didn't know to stand up to the group and say this is not going to work. Anyway, aside from that, what lasting problems came out of the show, which, by the way, was a great show. There we go.
I can take that one. I would say we had a bruised ego and some brand effects, but there was no lasting effects to the environment. Like I alluded to, the bobolink bird was completely compensated, and I would say, and I think the NCC would agree, have more habitat out of the 2015 concert than they did before, because we were tilling hay in that property, which destroys their habitat. Now they have the exact same amount of acreage, and that hay is not tilled during their mating season. So we have more habitat for the environment. And the barn swallows, we did a study pre-Shania Twain and post-Shania Twain, and they were completely unaffected in terms of numbers. We have barn swallows that, as the barn swallow does, builds their nests adjacent to our barn, and like I said, their numbers were completely unaffected. In terms of lasting effect, there were none.
Okay, so presumably whatever happens next is going to have even less impact going forward, because you had to have learned a lot from that. And
in terms of transportation, we're in the middle of creating a transportation study that we'll submit to planning that will go through the scenarios of various sizes of events from 5 to 25,000 to explain how we would deal with that, or how the third party that rents the site would do so. In terms of environmental, there's nothing permanent there, so I can't see anything.
Prior to the event, we're not supposed to say I told you so here, but prior to the event, I did point out that the question isn't where the event is, it's where the audience is coming from. And it's coming from across the region, which it does for the Red Blacks game. So it seemed logical to me to just plug into that same system. But still, in the worst case scenario, which is what I think we had, although people had to wait, it still came out pretty good.
But thank you for saying so, but the one thing I do want to comment is there are a few significant challenges in comparison to like a red-black scenario that we will have to meet, but in consultation with planning and the NCC, I think they're challenges that we believe we can meet. And the study that we're currently in will address.
All right, thanks.
And I think that's some of the things, too, that were problematic will be identified through the SEAT process and the ever-expanded SEAT process, because some of the things that I heard about, in addition to the traffic, were definitely food and not enough food, washrooms and not enough of that, too. So I think there's some of that could be handled through that. But who have I got next here? Councillor Nussbaum. And then Councillor Leeper.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question about the Forest and Nature School. Is that something that you run?
It's a third party called the Child and Nature Alliance. So they run quite a few programs, and I'm happy to explain what they do.
No, it's okay. I just had a specific question, because in the staff report, it says there's no need for a structure building at this time. But then it also says that when the applicant would like to expand the daycare facility to include a building, a site plan control application will be required. The proposed building will not have any blah, 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 blah. So are there plans for a proposed building or not?
Yeah, so if you wouldn't mind just giving me a minute to explain what the Forest School does, and I can explain the plans, and it is an if, not a when. So there's the Ottawa Forest School operated by the Child and Nature Alliance. The Child and Nature Alliance does two things. They plan conferences and practitioners courses that teach about the Forest School methodology, and they also run the Ottawa Forest School, which currently has school-age, preschool, and families, children participating in educational programs on the site. That's in partnership with the Ottawa District School Board and Andrew Fleck Child Services. So that's happening right now. It's utilizing the, I think, built in 1960s amphitheater that was built by the NCC on the property. So they use that, and they also use a cabin, a temporary cabin that's on site. Not the one that Mr. Cullen was referring to. That's for the Canada Nordic site. There's another cabin down through some trails by the existing amphitheater. If they were to expand, it wouldn't be like a school. It would be within the existing built area. They would have kind of a 4-room facility. Their plans, this is their plans, not our plans, but their plans include a 1 room for Aboriginal children, 1 room for kind of infants and preschoolers, and two rooms for preschool children. I know we're getting into details here, but we're talking about a fairly modest building, and because they integrate within the forest, it's very important to them and to us that it would be an environmentally sound building within the built areas of the campground. Furthermore, like Greg alluded to, there has to be a federal land use agreement. We have to apply to NCC for that. So we do have NCC approval in principle of both that building and the growth of the forest school, but of course we have to go through a FLUDA and a full EA for where that would occur, when it might occur. So it's a real kind of if scenario at this point. But we do want to include for that in the zoning application.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Raper?
Thanks. I'm going to lay my cards on the table and say the opportunity for a large music festival in a rural space is actually exciting to me. I think Ottawa needs that, and I think this is a great place to host it. But the 2015 concert was obviously a bit of a clusterfudge. That shakes some confidence. Who are you going to hire to take a look at the environmental impacts? How long are they going to be retained by you? What is going to be their expertise? I understand that you're not going to build like a PG&E amphitheater outdoors, but it's a lot of trucks to bring in the stage from Wall Sound or whoever. The potential for things to go wrong is fairly big, and I want to know that you're hiring very good people to make sure that you are not damaging the ecosystem around you.
So thank you for asking my question. There's 2 parts that I want to answer that. Firstly, our partner for 2015 was AEG Live. Speaking from past experience, it wasn't a good experience for us. We have a new partner that is fully committed to both this city and to the site, and furthermore to their fans. So we feel very confident that they will be able to pull it off and care very deeply about that fan experience. So that's kind of one thing about confident in our partner going forward. And secondly, we've been working with Regional to do all our EAs, and we would continue to work with them on that.
What aspects are they looking at? Are they taking a look at logistics plans and trying to really understand what the potential impacts are for the natural environment around you? Is it just a quick inventory? I'm curious, for instance, when you did your counts for barn swallows, who did that work, and were they qualified to do it?
Yeah, they're an international consultant. You can probably speak to it better.
So who was retained? It was Golder Associates that was actually retained for the work.
Golder? Okay.
So they produced a series of reports. There was the barn swallow report. There was the bobolink report. And so it resulted in some approvals from the NCC as a result of those reports. And some of that work is actually ongoing today. So some of the stuff that Karen was alluding to is that because we actually have a footprint in a hayfield where bobolink tend to exist, they had to compensate for the loss of that. Even though the hayfield is still there today and it's still being used, they actually made an agreement with the farmer to the south of the 417, and they reserved an area in there that's sown with seed as a recommendations from Golder Associates to plant for the bobolink to exist in that location. And that's going to be contained in perpetuity for, I think it's a 10-year period. I think you have an agreement with it, 5-year period, with the option to renew it. And this has all, again, been blessed by the NCC. On top of that, there's a monitoring program. So Golder's has been going out and monitoring the bobolink to see what the impacts are. And that's in line with any kind of development application that we do in the City of Ottawa where we're impacting the potential habitat of a species at risk. Now, the federal government doesn't consider bobolink as a listed species. However, we've been following basically the provincial rules and then some. So we're always trying to find the most respectful, most advantageous position in order to respect the environment going forward. And we'll continue to work with Golders in that aspect.
There are going to be the potential for things like, fire, for example. You've got a lot of electrical gear on site when you're having a large outdoor concert. I know of one recent, very unfortunate instance in the ward recently where a fire at a site has left, a temporary impact in the sand with respect to the fallout from that. each seat meeting, I'm sure that whoever is the councillor for Bay Ward during the next season will want to take a look and be involved with that very closely. Sorry?
I'm just not understanding what you're talking about, sand and season and
the festival season. In the next festival season, I know the
festival season. I thought you meant the term of council.
No, but the next councillor I know will want to be heavily engaged. So I would love to make sure that you are bringing the most detailed reports possible to those seat meetings in order to ensure that all the different permutations and combinations of things that could go wrong are being looked at from that environmental perspective.
Absolutely. As we go forward on each of these applications with SEED, it's an iterative process. So there's a huge group of people. There's bylaw, there's fire, there's police, there's paramedics. Everybody sits around the table and we dialogue these things for months in advance. Like Shania Twain was a good 6 months of back and forth dialogue with the SEED committee to come up with the best operable plan. In recognition, there were some traffic issues that came out of that. We don't deny that. That's part of the bruised ego that Karen spoke to. But there were lessons learned from that. We actually did a traffic monitoring study. So we had cameras up at all the intersections and worked with that to produce a traffic monitoring report. And there's been some very valuable lessons in that coming out of that process that's going to enlighten us into the next application with SEED going forward. So,
well, I would urge you to keep Golder involved for the next several years. Just absolutely, as that confidence level on the part of the city needs to be restored.
It's required by the NCC, so we'll definitely be doing that.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else have questions before I go to Councillor Taylor? Okay, Councillor Taylor.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair, and thank you, colleagues, for hearing this application. I want to say that we have had nothing in our office but a productive and positive working relationship with the Wesley Clover Parks and Karen and her team, as well as the NCC and planning staff, both on this file and on this space. Ever since the assumption of the former City of Nepean and Ottawa Campground Equestrian Park, these lands have been in a state of kind of exciting and evolving iterations, and I think Councillor Hubley alluded to that. This site currently hosts sports events, equestrian competitions, races, runs, the Kinetic Nordic Ski Club. It's also home to the Forest School. We heard about that. It's an innovative partnership that provides education in a natural learning environment. One of the long-term goals of the site was always to be able to host country-style music festivals on interim or on an annual basis. And several years ago, of course, we talked about the Shania Twain concert. I want to offer this as the ward councillor. In a large measure, the issues experienced at the concert were ones of a learning nature. We heard about them, the need for some additional water stations and, longer lines should have been shorter lines. The tripwire issue that we heard about, and Councillor Shirelli spoke about it, was the ability to get people on and off the site. A lot of learning has been done in that regard, and I would argue that this is not inconsistent with how other large festivals have evolved over time. Blues Fest, Jazz Fest, even events such as Escapade, which we allow to be held in the city, which have, I would argue, much more significant impacts on people. We managed to be able to work with the proponents to pull off all these events. I'm in support of this application as long as we have the controls that are embedded in the report that allow for the evolution of the site in a managed and responsible way. Heard about the green space and the impact to the environment, and of course, if you're concerned about having safeguards in that, the NCC, who are comfortable with the application, provided that all of the future FLUTA agreements come back to them for approval. They are the stewards of that space on behalf of the people of Canada, but this is not an inconsistent use with what is on site today. It's an evolution of the use that's on site today. I would argue that our zoning decision here simply further enables and allows something that is currently taking place on the site to take place in a more formalized way, but it also installs caps and controls on how that can grow over time. Despite the need for the staff and the parks to develop a better transportation plan and get people on and off the site, remember that this site is at the nexus of the 416 and the 417. It does not immediately abut a residential community. It's nearby. And after the 2023 Stage 2 completion of the LMSF next door, there'll be a special events LRT platform at this site. So for an event space, you're going to be immediately served by an LRT platform. You are at the junction of two major highways, and with a sufficient and robust transportation plan, I think these are all the elements that actually make it an ideal site. The site is appropriate for this type of use. Like any large event, they're going to have to work with SEAT to ensure that there's a mitigated impact to this space. But I would support this rezoning, especially with the temporary cap secured by a holding symbol in place to manage the size, allowing for the exemption next year for a one-time music festival that can be an opportunity for staff and for their planner and for their consultants to prove the concept that a larger event can work well on the site. So I want to thank you for hearing this application today and allowing this site, if you support this, to evolve and continue to grow in a way that's both responsible to the environment, supportive of the local arts and business community, and also takes a piece of green space and actually invites people into it. And, we talk a lot about the importance of preservation of our green space, and obviously sitting on the Environment Committee, I'm very supportive of that. But one of the very nice things about green space is the opportunity to invite Ottawans and Canadians into the space to enjoy it. I know a lot of people who struggled with, we don't know what's going on at Wesley Clover Parks, but once you get them onto the site, whether it's for an equestrian event, a race, a run, they tend to go back quite a lot because they enjoy the site and they enjoy the natural offerings of the site. So I don't see these as inconsistent. I see them as complementary, and I'd ask for your support. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Councillor. Okay. Anybody else? Sure.
Just a question to staff. I'm just curious why the NCC didn't come forward, given that they're the applicant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We do have a letter of support written in from the NCC during the circulation process that states that they don't have any objections to the proposed rezoning and they support the added uses through the demonstration plan that was provided by Wesley Clover Parks.
Okay.
That it? Okay. So, zoning bylaw amendment, part of 401 and part of 411 Corkstown Road. Is that Carrie? Thank you. Okay, now we're going on to our last held item, which is the settlement of some appeals to OPA 150. And to that, speaking for that, on that is Alain Nicholas and Bruce Finley. Welcome. So we have questions, Alain. First up is Councillor Shirelli, Councillor Nussbaum, I think Councillor Leeper. Okay, Shirelli. Okay. Anybody else have questions on this? And Murray, you're here if you need, right?
Okay. Or hold off. I'll hold off till you say go.
I'm just thinking about, normally we ask questions after the delegation. Murray's just here to speak if we need him to. Do you have any questions of the industry at all? We do have a technical amendment. Okay. And our vice chair is not here, so yeah, it's moved by Vice Chair Tierney. Whereas this report includes a supporting document containing changes to official plan amendment number 150 as part of the agreed settlement of appeals by GOVA and BOMA, and whereas item 40 in document 1 to the staff report deals with building heights and where high-rise buildings may be considered, and whereas policy 15 was proposed to be modified to include high-rise as well as high-rise 31-plus buildings, and whereas further discussions between the parties has concluded that the original purpose of this policy in OPA 150 was to guide the location of buildings greater than 30 stories in height. Therefore, be it resolved that the Planning Committee approve a technical amendment to modify item 40, policy 15, in document 1 to staff, report ACS 2018-PIE-EDP-0047, to remove the words high-rise and from the beginning of policy 15. And there's a whole bunch of stuff attached here. Okay? That's the technical amendment. So, it was pretty technical. I didn't do that, though, because I like you too much. People respect you.
From one side.
They do. I'll tell you after. Came up yesterday at the Ontario Home Builders Association. It did. It was respectful. Okay, Councillor Shirelli, and then Councillor Nussbaum, Councillor Leeper. Okay, Shirelli.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, I have always, since I first got on council, wondered about the logic of having these things move off into settlements between parties in the city, because it leaves out the public, which is involved in every other part of it. So except the settlement, it doesn't make sense to me, but this is what we live under. So my first question is just generally, what do the developers in this case think they got out of this settlement?
That would be, they can't answer for the developers. Murray is there, so Murray can answer, because, I'm pretty sure that Bruce and Alant are not going to
What was your big win?
Clarity.
Clarity.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good answer. Well, that's all he said. That's the answer.
But, okay, nobody appeals to get clarity. They appeal to get...
Well, if your legal people probably like that a lot, right, Mr. Mark?
That is true, Madam Chair. One of the matters that come up across this appeal and across other appeals is where the appellants are seeking clarity with respect to what is sought by the policy.
So there was no additional rights or abilities that come out of this?
The second word that I would provide would be flexibility. There's some flexibility that addresses the concerns that we had, that we would have to come back with official plan amendment applications on minor deviations from the policies as they were written.
Okay, I guess the next question would be how minor that would be.
That would be determined through zoning and site plan processes.
Yeah, so that can be a larger definition than maybe obvious here. So a secondary question I have, and I'll ask it now because it really doesn't fit anywhere else, and that is regarding who the parties were. And I know some people in my ward are wondering if Diamond was one of the parties, either as an individual on the Clyde application that's pending or citywide on potential new policy.
Madam Chair, I'm not certain. I thought I heard Diamond as in the storage company?
Yes.
No, they are not have any status in the OP.
Okay, I believe that to be the case, but I had to ask it. Next, so from staff's point of view, what difference will this make in terms of likelihood of projects getting approved on a high-rise basis? So what difference does it make? How much more likely, less likely, in what circumstances?
Mr. Chairman, what we sought to do here is to describe as best we can in the policy framework what we're looking for in terms of outcomes, and also account for the fact that no two sites are the same, and there's still an ability for our colleagues in development review to take the policy and take the intent of the policy and arrive at the right answer based on site-specific conditions when they deal with an application, and hopefully that application is zoning or site plan and not an official plan amendment. So we're trying to eliminate the need for discussions at the policy level when you come to a side-by-side scenario where your policy is clear enough that you know what you have to do and you're able to deal with an application based on what you need to deal with on a particular site. That's, from our standpoint, a richer planning framework.
Yes, well, that does that make it easier to get approval for a high-rise?
I wouldn't say necessarily, Mr. Chairman. It gives you, it spells out where you're allowed to do a high-rise and where you're not allowed to do a high-rise, and that's what the policy framework is set up to do.
Okay, but does it provide council with the same basis to reject an application as it would have today? Or does a rejection does a rejection get exposed to vulnerability because it doesn't have the same protections of official plan status?
That's a difficult question to answer, Mr. Chairman. It would depend which designation you're in the city. I mean, there's designations in the official plan where you can do a high-rise as of right. By and large, though, I mean, this official plan introduces the need for a secondary plan to exist in most cases where you're going above a certain type of high-rise building. So in the absence of a secondary plan, you're into a process to amend the official plan anyways. But by and large, where you're already allowed to do a high-rise building, I would say that there's no change. It's pretty much the same approach. It's just spelling out where you're allowed to do a high-rise and where you're not allowed to do a high-rise.
And does this mean there are more places where you're allowed to do a high-rise?
In the final analysis, there's not a big difference, Mr. Chairman. As it relates to mixed-use centers, we know that most of them, if not all, already are under a secondary plan or a TOD plan or an area-specific policy in the official plan itself. So that's one thing that we checked and double-checked before recommending what's before you today.
Do the secondary plans, under this scenario, do the secondary plans hold the same weight as the overall official plan?
Secondary plans are adopted under Section 17 of the Planning Act, and they remain of the same force. That's just by way of how the Planning Act operates, Mr. Chairman. So they're part of the official plan.
So, but that's really a no, right?
I beg your pardon?
That's a no?
Well, no, that's a yes. Okay. A secondary plan has the same force as the official plan.
So if a secondary plan limits the height, that... Okay. Then, so does this make it easier or harder for somebody to assemble properties, say 2 properties that are each 200 feet from the main street? Yeah. Does it make it easier or harder to do that assembly, and therefore does it grant the assembling party easier access to building a high-rise?
I would say it does neither. Neither easier nor more difficult, Mr. Chairman. Land assemblies would take place on, again, very site-specific conditions and circumstances, and I don't think that there's anything that the policy incents or disincents in any different way than before.
Okay, then what's the point of it?
Simply
because I seem to be hearing that it makes almost no difference.
So... I'm not sure which particular policy you're referring to, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. If it doesn't make it more, if it doesn't make it easier to assemble and build high-rises within the 400 meters, if it makes almost no difference with respect to that, and it makes almost no difference with respect to the secondary plan, what's gained by this?
I think perhaps what we are focusing in on here, Mr. Chairman, is the language in the policy that talks about the arterial Main Street designation extending to 400 meters potentially. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So right now in the existing official plan, we go to 200 meters for main streets in general. This addition was to recognize that in arterial main streets, sometimes there are lots that are deeper than 200 meters, but it has to be an existing lot. So right now, I mean, I can think of examples along Innes Road in Orleans where we have lots that are in excess of 300 meters in depth. Along the east side of Merivale, south of Baseline, where you have lots that are between 200 and 300 meters in depth. But those are existing lots of record. They have to be existing lots of record. If you're purchasing a lot that is today under the general urban designation, it keeps that designation.
Okay. So even if somebody assembles a property that is then 400 meters, that doesn't fall under it?
It would not fall under that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right, that's it for now.
Thank you. Councillor Nussbaum.
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions. One related to the maximum parking issue. Could staff just characterize how they think what the meaning of those changes are, that would be helpful.
Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, the wording that we added basically makes it more explicit, I guess you would say, that if the city were to introduce new limits on parking, that we would want to be sensitive to the context of the area around which those new regulations would apply. So just to back up a little bit, we already have maximum parking provisions around transit stations. Those have been in place since the region of Ottawa-Carleton when the transitway was first put in service. So none of those are being affected or touched. We're also not touching our ability to reduce or eliminate parking requirements. This is something that talks about introducing new limits on how much parking you're allowed to provide within the vicinity of transit stations. And the language that we've introduced simply makes it clear that as the city does that, it would have regard for the context around which those new limits would be brought in. So let's say that it's a station that won't be built for the next 15 years. We might think of it differently than if it's around a station that is about to go under construction.
So under item 83 on parking policy, the proposal is to delete section E. I'm on page 26 of the report, which used to say, the city may undertake reviews of the zoning bylaw with respect to parking requirements appropriate to implement the broader goals of the plan. I'm just trying to understand, and Mr. Mark, this may be a question for you. Surely the city can undertake reviews of the zoning bylaw whenever it wishes. So what is the significance of deleting this subparagraph?
Madam Chair, if I may, that section really is being replaced by the new subsection 37, where we've consolidated everything under one clause. So Councillor Nussbaum's correct. We retain the ability to review our zoning provisions at any given time.
Okay, thank you. And my second set of questions, which I think were answered by Councillor Chiarelli's question about arterial main streets, was 400 meters in some contexts. I'm thinking about, say, Montreal Road, east of Saint Laurent, for example, where the lots are not deep. And I think I heard you say a land assembly would not be a way of achieving a larger footprint or larger depth of those lots. Is that correct?
That's correct, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. I'm finished, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Ripa.
Thanks. And I just want to thank staff for the line by line, the black line version. That was extremely helpful in terms of understanding what precisely has changed. I know I asked you for that in the high-rise design guideline document to get that. That never actually crossed my desk to get those precise changes. But in this instance, having a black line version of the changes was extremely helpful. My only question was with respect to on pages 24 and 25 of the document. The one thing I didn't understand in this document was you've struck out in section 2.3.1, 83 parking policies, the city may undertake reviews of the zoning bylaw with respect to parking requirements. Further down, you've added a section under section 84 in order to achieve the parking objectives identified in policies, blah, blah, blah. What is the effect of that change? I didn't understand that.
Madam Chair, it's simply a consolidation of the policy into a single clause where it flows logically with the rest of the policy. That's all it is. So it says the same thing.
Okay.
And it does the same thing.
So it accomplishes no substantial, meaningful change in the parking?
No, it's just cleaning up the order and flow of the policy.
Okay. And I'll have if I may just ask a question to Mr. Chown. You mentioned earlier that what the developers are getting out of this is clarity. We do want to understand, the developers clearly got something out of this, the builders got something out of this. What were the effects about which you were concerned had there been a continuing, as you assert, lack of clarity? What could have been some of the negative outcomes for builders, and then how would those have impacted on residents?
With respect, through the chair, that's not what the clarity provided. There was just the language of the policy sometimes weren't clear to us in terms of what they were trying to achieve, and that through the discussions with staff, we've been able to provide some clarity so we understand what the policy is intended to achieve. They understand, so moving forward, we're all on the same page. This is not a what did you get out of the process. It's not what we got was some clarity on policies which we were unclear on as they were adopted by council. We've clarified some of that language.
Okay, so what you're telling me is that you simply didn't know what the city meant by some of the language that it was using, and now you do.
In many of the changes that are made, that's exactly the case, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Good questions. Anybody else? Okay, so on the settlement of some appeals to OPA 150, and I want to thank you very much for all of your efforts, because it is time to move on. We've got all of our big plans coming up in the next term of council, and I'm glad that we've cleared the decks of this portion of it. So thank you, Mr. Mark and your team, and thank you, Murray and your team, and thank you, Alana and Bruce. We have a technical amendment. Vice Chair Tierney.
It's red, so I can...
Oh, you read it? Yeah. Oh, yeah, I read it. That's why I'm confused.
Yeah.
All right. So on the technical amendment, is that carried? Okay. And on the one dissent, Councillor Shirley had. Sorry, I'm dissenting on the. Oh, you're not dissenting on the technical. Well, then hold your fire till I'm ready for you. Okay. So everybody agrees on the technical amendment. On the report as amended. Carried. Perfect. Now I have some very good news for you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Okay, I have to go. Notice of motion. Councillor Shirelli.
Okay. It's moved by myself, whereas the Planning Act provides the ability for municipalities to collect land for parks or cash in lieu of land for parks at the time of development, redevelopment, or when new lots created through plans of subdivision or through severances. And whereas the Planning Act provides for parkland or cash in lieu of parkland to be collected concurrently with the planning approval or at the time of issuance of a building permit, and whereas prior to amalgamation, the former municipalities had different approaches as to when parkland or cash in lieu of parkland was taken, and whereas the former city of Ottawa as an urban municipality collected parkland or cash in lieu of parkland at the time of the issuance of a building permit, and whereas the former municipalities' bylaws were harmonized, the new parkland dedication bylaw of amalgamated Ottawa provided for parkland or cash in lieu of parkland to be taken concurrently with a planning approval or site plan control plan of subdivision or consent. And whereas this approach does not provide for parkland or cash in lieu of parkland to be taken in the absence of a planning approval, therefore be it resolved that staff be directed to review the current parkland dedication bylaw and assess whether changes may be suitable to modify the time at which parkland dedication is taken, in particular for developments where no planning approvals are required but where the use of the land is being intensified. Be it therefore resolved that staff bring back a report to committee no later than the fourth quarter of 2019, reporting on the findings of the review, along with recommendations that may be considered warranted.
So in a nutshell, do you want to just tell us what it is you hope to accomplish?
In a nutshell, we have, over 50 properties, for instance, in Cityview, where development has occurred, which would normally generate cash in lieu of parkland to the city, but which did not have to pay cash in lieu of parkland because they were created without having to go through that planning approval process. And so they escaped having to pay cash in lieu of parkland that everyone else had to pay. That's basically it.
Lots are about half to 3/4 of an acre or something, and now the houses are half to 3/4 of an acre built line to line.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So that's a notice of motion. Any inquiries? Yes?
Madam Chair, how will the city expedite building permit application approvals to ensure that houses that have been damaged or destroyed by the September 21st significant weather events can be fixed as soon as possible?
So we'll have something at council on that tomorrow.
Excellent.
Yep.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Can I just get my question on the record, though?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Do you have it written down?
Yes. Yep.
Hand it into...
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Okay.
Okay, other business. Here's the good news. You ready? Oh, no. The only planning committee meeting scheduled in October is on October 9th. Okay? So, we're only having one in October. The November 13th planning committee meeting has been canceled. The November 27th planning committee meeting has been rescheduled to November 20th. So we're blending the two of them because we have a ton of work. Like if you saw the legislative list of them, it's not like, we're doing it for any other reason. It just makes sense. And then December 11th planning committee meeting has been canceled. Now, that could change if situations change, but that's how we're going to go forward, and we're going to send that out to everybody today so you can put it into...
When is swearing in?
Swearing in is December 1st, which it always is. I know, who knows will be returning.
Exactly.
That's what he said.
I'm cheering, but I have no idea if I'll be here.
Okay, who wants to move the motion that we have more than Tim Bitts? Anyway, don't wait for it. Anyway, thanks everybody. So our next meeting is Tuesday, October the 9th. Thanks a lot. And thanks, Derek, for filling in.